Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Doyen. I am the Executive Vice President of INSA and one of the hosts with my AFCEA colleagues for this event. I want to welcome everybody. We're going to, if our moderator and panelists could take the stage, and I'll also encourage everyone to make room for more folks, because I know we still have some people coming in here. And there's some more chairs available in this section. There's chairs sprinkled throughout. So hopefully, if folks in the back, there are seats for you. You do not have to stand the entire time. There's some throughout the room. So with that, welcome. We have a great breakout session for you today. It's called The Challenge of AI. If you want to be hearing about space, you need to go into another breakout room. This is the challenge of AI. It's like the stewardesses on the plane. You're going to Houston, you go get on another plane. Challenge of AI, seeing is no longer believing, and we have a great panel lineup. Our moderator today is Adam Lurie. He's the CEO of Knexus. With him is Welton Chang, the co-founder and CEO of Pyrra Technologies. We also have Will Corvey from DARPA, the Informational Innovation Office Program Manager. We have Mark Munsell, who's from NGA. He's the Director for Digital and Data and Digital Innovation. And then Jason Richards, Deputy Assistant Director, Directorate of Intelligence from FBI. So what we'll do is we'll let the panel run. If you have questions, please give them to one of our INSA interns. There's cards for everybody on your chairs. We'll be collecting those throughout the discussion and getting them up here to Adam.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, John. So pretty much every day when I get home from work, my son runs up to me and yells, "Daddy, guess what I learned on YouTube today?" To which my eyes start to roll, and it begins this long diatribe about sources and truth and the internet, and he runs away about 5 seconds after. But so today, with this expert panel, we're going to have a conversation around topics that frankly are happening at the highest levels of the intelligence community and in our family rooms. It's about open source data, the internet, the use of AI, and truth and trust. And so I want to start by this concept of trustworthiness and open source data. And so, Dr. Corvey, I want to start with you. And so, as the intelligence community begins to use commercial open source data, and we talk about trust and trustworthiness, what criteria should be used to begin to evaluate its trustworthiness, and how do you measure it?
So I think one of the really interesting things about doing research in AI and AI-adjacent agency areas over the last few years has been the rise of generative AI and the way that's interacted with the way that we try to make sense of the information space. So DARPA I2O and other areas of DARPA have put millions and millions of dollars of research money into figuring out how to distill down activities that are described in open source news, present these to an analytic community in a way that allows them to make intelligent and informed decisions. And some of that research has looked at how to reconcile different facts that might be presented from disparate sources on the internet in order to come up with some semblance of at least an analysis of alternatives, if not, actually what is decisively true at any given moment. Now what we've seen is that's problematized by the fact that generative AI could have produced seemingly authentic data, things that we would have assumed were authentic a couple of years ago even, and rendered them in a way that they're indistinguishable from something that could be one of those alternatives. So from a research perspective, what we've tried to do is sort of unpack two problems that I think are wrapped up in your single sentence. Authenticity and determining what authenticity means analytically, and then truth. Which truth should probably only be derived from authentic data. And so we have programming that runs sort of along those two lines of effort, dividing the world into authentic and inauthentic things, analyzing the techniques and procedures that lead to inauthentic media, And then once you've figured out what authenticity looks like, reconciling that into a common operating picture.
So, Jason, at the FBI, you're constantly looking for information for your investigations. How do you guys utilize this data, and verify and ensure there's a level of trust in it?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I talk about with my team a lot is, first of all, as much as AI is a fantastic tool, and in different things, or ML, or however you want to define it, there are some fundamental truths when it comes to data that we have to observe no matter what. Those things would be, following the applicable laws, privacy laws, making sure that we're, upholding rights that folks have under the Constitution when we're looking at that data and analyzing, and just make sure that it fundamentally, how did we acquire it? And so, because any AI is only as good as what you train it on. So I think those are one of the things that we look at, primarily to say, why should we have that? I think as you move forward, when we use it, it's very much, once we have those things that are true, what do we need to do to narrow down our investigations, just like we would anyways, to say, I've got a large data set, I need to find those factors that would lead me down to the more narrow, so that, one, we're looking at the right folks, two, we're looking what we have has been legally acquired as information, and three, the beautiful thing, if those things are true, is that we can adequately use limited resources to address whatever the threat is, right? So I think, if you take that privacy piece, if you take the investigative piece and the resource piece, and you do them all right, it's kind of amazing sometimes how you actually get to the right things you should be looking at and to work. One thing I will add on top of that too, is because we do also go through, the criminal court system, there's a validation that's required, because you're producing evidence as opposed to having to necessarily just, have something that maybe you have certain confidences in. I don't say that one's any better than another, because they're made a certain way to accomplish a certain goal. But those are things as we go through, I know and we've seen, like any new technology, will be challenges as we go through and work, very closely with our U.S. attorney's offices and with the courts to make sure that we're looking at it the right way.
So along the lines of sort of privacy and sort of the legal use of this data, Mark, are there additional ethical or legal frameworks that you think are necessary or required to kind of balance innovation and AI and the use of the data?
Yeah, I think that, and like in our case in particular, where our agency concentrates mostly on the domain of computer vision in AI, the subdomain of computer vision, where literally for us, seeing it is believing. A lot of our customers, a lot of the people that consume our product rely on the fact that if you can see it, it means a lot. Oh, great. Somehow apologize for that. Somehow I've turned my mic off on the roads up here. So as I was saying, for us, using the visual is like the ultimate positive identification for our customers. In many cases, they're acting upon that positive identification. They're acting upon the visual identity and the geolocation of what we're providing. And when artificial intelligence provides that, you have to take those extra steps to make sure that the artificial intelligence that is producing that is 100% on. Because for us, the liabilities of identifying, in this case, a target that potentially could be a kinetic target moving down the road, we have to have the extra frameworks. We have to have sort of this extra level of responsibility put on that to ensure that that thing is 100% correct.
So to follow up on that, you talk about the 100% accuracy in terms of a target. What role do you think humans need to play or should play in the decision-making process when you're leveraging this type of data? And I want to ask that question to everybody as well.
Yeah, so it's fundamental that we have that human interaction today. A lot of people try to project, a lot of people try to say, when we lay these safe frameworks or these responsible AI frameworks on our business, some of them think that we're going too far, right? You're going to slow down by making the AI safe. And in reality, we think we can speed up. The safer we can make the AI, the higher quality that we can make the AI, the more likely that we'll be able to make those calls, human-assisted calls, much faster with much more accuracy. But there's no way anytime in the foreseeable future that I can see in my lifetime that we wouldn't have a human making that judgment call with the assistance of AI.
Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, my company primarily builds technology that helps our clients see vast amounts of data, identify violent threats, hate speech, and that sort of content very quickly. And one of the challenges that we have is explaining to the folks that we work with how much they should trust the outputs from the system. And this is particularly challenging when algorithms are mostly black box. You don't know model weights, you don't know how the innards work. And even if you do, I'm going to use sort of a weird analogy here. I'm sure folks have been to national parks. The garbage cans in national parks. Usually you have to, depending on where they are, you have to kind of slide your hand underneath to kind of pull it open, right? Well, those are designed to defeat the smartest bear, but enable the least intelligent human, right? And so you have to design AI and explainable AI in a similar way. So, you know, it is definitely something that's not quite technical, but it's incumbent on engineers to really design with the person in mind when they're building this technology.
So, kind of along those lines, and as you know, as your company aggregates data from online and uses that, how do you best recognize malicious misinformation, disinformation, deepfakes, and how do you communicate with your customer set around that?
I mean, ultimately, those determinations are being made by humans. The AI can help you identify likelihoods, but if someone's trying to sell a system that is 100% certain about something, I think you should be quite suspicious of that. I don't think the systems are quite that good yet. But the challenge is that there is so much of this data out there. You need to have something to help bring it in to a single pane of glass and to be able to see it. But the determination and you know, keeping human in the loop, I think, is so important, especially right now with how nascent these technologies are. You know, there's not a system out there, I think, that can be standalone. And nor should we want that, I think. I think we as human beings need to maintain a hand on the wheel and not let, you know, it's not full self-driving, I guess, for these systems.
So, Will, along those lines, how do you think AI and machine learning can be used to help enhance the detection of misinformation, disinformation, and deepfakes?
Yeah, so I think first of all, I owe a lot to NGA. You published a beautiful public technology roadmap a couple years ago that I now run a program based around for conceptual object and activity recognition that has exactly these kinds of explainability. So that then you might ever want to deploy such a recognizer without constant human feedback. But if we sort of take that as a metaphor for the broader information space, I think misinformation is often in the eye of the beholder. And so what I'm focused on in my portfolio, and I'll speak in a moment about another part of the I2O portfolio that deals very directly with computational disinformation narratives, we're really just trying to figure out what's in a robust way, what's being described online. So if you had to ontologize the online experience of the individual and actually link all of those objects, activities, emotions, narratives at the semantic level, what does it all mean? And then when you overlay then in other programming in our office, an analysis of who's pushing which narratives, how they fit together, that's really where you can, I think, access the richness of online storytelling, and then start to divide out those perspectives. Now, clearly, you will get to the bottom of some perspectives and figure out that they are violent or they are factually incorrect. But I think the first step is really just understanding what's out there.
So, Mark, along those lines, I know as we prepped, you talked a lot about sort of visual images that may or may not be accurate. Do you want to talk a little bit about how imagery and online can be used both as a tool for bad actors?
No, when you use the term misinformation, one of the things that it keeps coming back to me is how often we use information, real information, or perceived real information. One of the cool things about the agency is that we can take a photograph of some actor, bad actor behavior, slide it across the table to the diplomat on the other side and say, see this? Here's a photograph. We know what you're doing. We're aware of this activity. And, in the past, that works. We have our satellites are above, and we're taking a photograph of your bad behavior. This, in this age, it could, sort of easily just be dismissed. Oh, that was faked. That was photoshopped, or even worse, right? That was generated with artificial intelligence. And so, what was a very valuable tool for us to be able to say, we know what's happening here, and even go a step further and put it on CNN. Go back to the when Russia was at the border of Ukraine and piling up. It was on CNN, right? Not our satellite images, but other providers putting those on the television. That has been diminished some now, because you can't just directly assume that what you see on an image is real information or is it misinformation.
And Jason, I think the same question to you. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I kind of take a little bit of a different twist on this. So when I think about these kinds of things, there's older words that we've had, and that kind of, again, back to kind of the basics, forgery, fraud. I mean, these are words that, that come through. And
these are FBI words.
Why, yes, they are. So as you look at that, I mean, what did we do to combat forgeries? You went and found experts that said that paint is not right on the painting. That's more my friends in Secret Service, but, with dollar bills and things, looking at counterfeits. The principles are the same. The only thing is I think very much with AI, you're talking forgery now at scales that we can't even imagine, right? And where do you afford that person that maybe doesn't have any of the expertise, that's just accessing something on the internet in Iowa, and are they going to access an AI expert to say, is this real? What do I do with it? So there's that. The other thing I want to do, it also say, is that it's a multimodal problem. I think if any one person, when I talk to, when I say AI, sometimes they'll immediately assume a visual. Sometimes they'll assume audio. Sometimes they'll assume textual, right? And then some others that are really, really smart will add a statistical layer on top of that. But I think what I want folks to think about, and one of the things we keep saying is, you might get AI on the phone, and by the way, that's happening now, and saying, it kidnapped someone, or whatever other lie or forgery or fraud that somebody's trying to commit to bring you in. Ultimately, what they're trying to get is your data. And then they're going to do something with it. That's true 1,000 years ago. It's true today. So what I would throw out to you is as you think about AI, definitely it's visual, definitely these other things, but it's multimodal, and they will and they'll combine them because they can to basically convince you to do something that you probably later are going to regret.
So we've obviously, there are different ways that organizations are attempting to watermark or sort of create differentiation between AI-generated content and non-AI-generated content. Do any of you see positive and successful ways at the moment to counter AI-generated contents? And can you talk about any of the, or if you don't, can you talk about ways where you can see both organizations and consumers being able to counter misinformation, disinformation, or fake information?
I'll just jump into a simple thing. Getting back, you kind of see I like to try to make things kind of like easy to understand for me sometimes. But good cyber hygiene. I mean, if somebody sends an email to you, does that email look right? They can generate it any way they want with AI or otherwise, but does it look right? Am I going to click on the link from the email that says external, or am I going to click on the, doing those basic things? And I know we've probably all in our companies and places get our phishing tests, and you're like, oh gosh, I clicked on the link. But in all truthfulness, though, like those are some of the basic things that can keep you out of a lot of problems. As I will tell you, especially like when I talk to our teams that work cyber. Again, it's somebody clicked on something got, took off, and they used the AI to entice you. It wasn't necessarily that the AI was a tool that then goes in and then, makes all your cybersecurity folks go nuts. So that's something I would say, just good basic cyber hygiene can help. And then the human factor they mentioned before.
Yeah, and I'll just pile on the human thing. I mean, think about it today. In our particular case, we use hundreds, maybe even thousands of humans to train these models. And the models produce this output, and then we have hundreds or thousands of humans that are sort of giving feedback to the models. And you got to ask yourself at some point, what are we doing here? It takes thousands and thousands of people to automate, and it's an actual joke that we have. That we try to explain to oversight. A lot of times our congressional overseers and OMB overseers and budgeteers, yeah, I actually said OMB, I probably shouldn't have said that, but they are looking for savings through automation, and we're in the era right now where, that's the great thing about automation, it takes so many people to do it. That's sort of the state that we're in right now. And so that's where we're at mostly today. There are companies and there are models being built specifically, right? AI models being built specifically to detect fakes and to detect forgeries, and that will be a booming business, just like cybersecurity. One side gets an advantage because they have a new hack or they have a new exploit. The other side has to step it up and to be able to defend against it. So AI companies are going to be making a lot of money off of each other.
So you see it as a booming business, but will it be successful? Does it have the capability of truly countering the threat that's being put out there?
So I think so. So I'm a little biased because I run a large research program called Semantic Forensics on the detection and attribution and characterization of the intent of manipulated synthetic media. We've done a lot of outreach commercially in that space. We have a lot of open source algorithms that are up on a site called semanticforensics.com. But at any rate, let me back up a little bit. So I think we're in a really exciting era for commercial growth, both of watermarking, iterative steganography approaches that allow you to trace the exfil path of something from your company. We're seeing a lot of people move into the deepfake detection space. I think largely what one would want to do in the future is allow federated access across a number of these analytics so that you can kind of triangulate on a probabilistic sort of meshing of all of those intuitions, many of which come from detection, some of which come from watermarking. I think we've seen interesting innovations on watermarking where it's destructive if you try to remove the watermark, so you can actually tell if someone has altered the watermark. I think my biggest concern, if we don't take a multi-pronged approach, though, and say put all our chips on watermarking, is there's an awful lot of internet content that will never be watermarked. So I'm quite concerned about protecting the Wayback Machine and our collective history, because it becomes really difficult if a meme has been drawn up from, say, 50 years ago, right, 30 years ago, where it's quoted somewhere and no one really remembers exactly that historical data point, and now it's being brought back into a popular narrative, and we can't actually tell readily as a culture what was true at that point in time. Obviously, we have libraries. This is something that can be defeated, but I think it's something that we have to take seriously in terms of that sort of very quick, as you mentioned, identification and treatment of misinformation.
I'm going to agree and slightly disagree with Will a little bit here and say that a layered approach to detection of deepfakes, for example, that's absolutely necessary. If you look at the performance of generalized models for detecting deepfakes, they're often, well, for one thing, they disagree with one another, right? If you want to run a piece of synthetic media through a number of different detectors, they'll all return different probabilities to you. So which one should I trust more? You can take statistical approaches to doing model averaging and things like that. There's all other kind of ensemble methodologies that you can use. But the real challenge is what happens in terms of our own perception of the legitimacy of that information when we see those disagreements amongst AI, right? That kind of decreases our trust in the technology, first of all. And then second, it's kind of an indication that the technology is not necessarily ready for full-scale deployment and may not ever be. We may not ever get to the point where all these different models agree with one another. And potentially when they do, it's because the piece of evidence or digital ephemera is actually doing a really good job of deceiving all of those technologies simultaneously, right? So I guess I'll be the technical pessimist here and say that I do, yes, it's a booming industry. Our company wouldn't exist if this AI wasn't necessary, but I personally see the downsides of it every day of looking at it and going, well, that actually is not right. That the model is not performing the way that we want it to.
How are your customers providing that feedback and interaction to you when you know the output may not be perfect?
Yeah, I mean, mostly when people email us and say, hey, this system's telling me one thing, but I know for a fact that it's not this thing, right? And we're very, very circumspect, careful when we talk about our technology and emphasize that the AI is not perfect. And I don't think any of us here would really want to live in a world where the AI is that good. And again, I'm going to, even though I run a tech company, I think we should all be deeply considering, pumping the brakes. And there was a movement at one point, in the not so distant past where a number of tech leaders said, hey, actually, we need to start to think about slowing the deployment of LLMs, of just releasing GPT-5 into the wild, of releasing Llama 3 into the wild. I think it's, that there was a lot of wisdom in that movement and generally agree with the ideas that we may be out over our skis a little bit, so.
I think just to amplify that, there were some notable signatories, to my knowledge, absent from that movement, right? So many Chinese entities have open sourced, for instance, text-to-video generation models like Sora, which has been held within the organization at OpenAI, largely due to these kinds of security concerns. So I think, there are at least 3 points that are probably need to be dealt with in deploying these technologies. One, just kind of taking that intuition of crowdsourcing and recovering it for analytics. So I think the orchestration is really important. So it turns out when you deploy multiple human beings, you get a better answer than just one. We need to make sure that's also the case for models. The orchestration also helps with runtime performance. So we haven't talked about compute a lot, but if you want to eat up your AWS budget, just deploy a bunch of GPU-heavy analytics simultaneously for every piece of data. And then the third one is counterforensics, which you also mentioned. So we have academics that we've worked with extensively who scare us every time they talk about what they were able to do. So it's a known and potentially emerging threat space, I think, for a lot of these models. Yeah.
So just a reminder, if you have any questions, there are people walking around the room with index cards. We've got some good questions from the audience already, so please feel free to write and send them give them to the people walking around the room. This is for anybody. Can you talk about what it means for AI to become self-aware, and should we be concerned about this at any point in the near future? Anybody want to take that?
I would say, no, I mean, I'm not going to say, use the term self-aware or whatever, but when it's capable enough to, and this is especially would be on the using AI irresponsibly, right, to guard against that. When it's good at replicating itself, penetrating networks, when it's good at hacking, when it's good at sort of overtaking entire systems, and able to propagate itself smartly. So we should be, the term self-aware is, I think, obviously that's not the right term, but when AI is capable enough of causing grave damage because of the high level of capability, yeah, we should be concerned about that.
I think I prefer anyway to use a term like introspection. So we strive to provide AI with representations that are both human inspectable and allow for structured introspection and therefore structured explanation of what the AI thinks that it perceives. So that then we can have actually a grounded conversation about, say, an object recognition in an image. Which is just not possible without having that neurosymbolic or symbolic plus neural representation, so that you have some symbolic taxonomy that you can actually refer to and know that you're talking about the same thing. I think that's probably somewhere in the basis of something like that becoming self-aware, but AI becoming self-aware is not a research topic that I work on right now.
Well, I think I would say if you think about the themes that have been brought up by the panelists, there's always this concept of human-machine interaction in all of the different processes. So, at least as I hear your answers, there's sort of this constant theme around the interaction of AI agents and humans, and it seems like we're a long way from sort of the concept of fully autonomous and self-aware in the decision process.
Yeah, I think there's another thing, and I'm going to try to make sure I be very responsible about how I say this, but I think when you're talking about self-aware or autonomous or act like a human or all these kinds of things, if it's acting on its own, but who created it, but is it responsible for the crime? Is there... I mean, I even go to my, mens reas or intent or those kind of things, and who's responsible for what it does? And if I post it somewhere and everybody starts slapping other code on it, who's responsible? Ultimately, we're going to have to work those things out. I think not only from an ethical standpoint, because I don't want to just get to the legal, as whether or not we should be doing these things. So I think about that. The other thing I would say is I kind of joke with my team is I always try to be like a pathological optimist. And one of the things I think that's included with that is as much as we will see people use these things because it's a tool for evil doings, there will also be a market and also I think a need for other folks to build things that can counter them. And I think we all know who we hope wins.
Yeah, go well.
I'll just add, I recall back in 2002, thinking about the Turing test, and for those who may not be familiar with the Turing test, right, whether or not the machine can basically pass for being a human. And when GPT-3 and 4 were released, I think we just skipped right past it, right? It's very, very hard to tell that GPT is not, there's a human on the other end of it. And so if I had to posit a guess, if we continue along current paths of development, we may get to a, you want to call it conscious, self-aware, agentic, whatever terminology you want to use. It may happen without us basically realizing it, right? Where we're trying to accomplish one thing and ultimately wind up accomplishing something else. And that's, again, why I think there should be some broader conversation about how fast we want to move as a sector, as a country, as a world about this.
So sort of staying with you, Welton, as you're reviewing content, the concept of hallucination and Gen AI generated content comes up. And so how do you or how are we sort of able to assist people in identifying hallucinated content, which is going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think we work with so many experts, and our clients are mostly experts, because they're able to look at the content that they're seeing and say, well, that's not quite right. I think there was very recently a case in the UK, I want to say, where some family purchased a AI-generated mushroom identification book. I don't know if this is actually real or not, but they ate what the book said were edible mushrooms, turned out not to be edible, got poisoned, and so now there's a question of, right, is Amazon responsible? Is whoever posted the book responsible? There's all these different things. It goes back to source veracity, it goes back to information integrity and all of those things, the principles that you all probably are exercising every single day in your daily work. It doesn't go out the window just because of some new technology. It actually makes it more important for the work that you're doing day in, day out, and how careful and how you scrutinize that information. Yeah.
So kind of along those lines of kind of data and the use of it, Jason, have there been any circumstances where you have had AI-generated content that you have used in an investigation or a case that you're able to discuss?
So have we encountered AI? I mean, I can answer the question. Yes. I would tell you more in the criminal context. Yes, we've encountered that. We've encountered the issues with it. I would probably, again, I'd have to defer a little bit more to like some of the specific investigations in my cyber division, but just answering to the crowd. Yes, have we encountered it? Of course we have. It's real. It's here now. It's not a future thing. I think in regards to synthetically generated, not to refer to any specific case, but synthetically generated information that have encountered or are worried about encountering would include obviously forgeries, business email compromises, child sexual abuse material, and then also to some folks that have been using it to malign foreign influence. So I would just throw those things out as we've encountered it, yes. We are going to address it just like every organization has to. A lot of times we have to do that forensically, and then we're going to have to go and have somebody testify about it in court. So I would say the answer is yes, and that would probably be the best answer I could give you.
So, and I'll throw this out to anybody, but is along the lines of sort of foreign influence campaigns, is there a way that we can use AI to mitigate any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've been talking about already, which is just detection, right? I mean, again, just another form of forgery of that information. I think making people aware that it's out there, I think one of the best things you can say to folks is be an educated consumer. Look at those things, like we said, the human factors. I don't know how good the detection systems are out there, the services. Again, I know that will grow as a market. I wouldn't have to say one way or the other on that. We're aware that they're out there. But I think, again, it's really for that person being an educated consumer to see what the information is that's coming across. Don't get too angry about it. That'd be nice. But yeah, that's what I would say is the best answer.
But will they believe you when you say that it's artificial intelligence? Right? I mean, that's the issue.
Yeah.
I've seen 1 million Russian bots on Twitter. Nobody cares.
That's right.
I think
So it does become this, it's not just the technical ability to identify the data, it is also the cultural ability to accept that it's not true. It is a combination of, when you talk about accuracy and trust.
And that's why the machines will take over.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I could jump back, so for us, for the Bureau, and I kind of give, this is really important for me to say, I mean, the ways that we look at AI, and especially in this context, would be, one, how are criminals and, state actors using it? That's one of the biggest things for us. The second thing was, how can we protect our innovation here in our country and stopping those folks from trying to steal it, right? And I think those are really important things for us to be thinking about as we go through this. I think the third thing for certain that we're also doing is how can we use it responsibly, which I've discussed some of that already, but I just use an example, like, ethics council that we have to look at this, that's multidisciplinary, working with science and working groups out there. It's really important to do that, talking with academia, talking with folks that set national standards, because we know we don't have all those answers internally, and none of us do, especially with this stuff.
So we have a few questions here about the business of AI, and sort of the market of AI systems and tools. So to start, how do you think industry can best support a government organization or commercial customer leveraging AI? And Welton, let's start with you. And
I mean, this was something that we were talking about backstage. Having the right policies in place for you to be able to take advantage of the technologies that are out there. That's usually the biggest hurdle with private sector entities working with the government is, can you get through legal? It seems simple, but often when you're going back and forth red lines with the lawyers, it's not that simple. So. You may want the latest and greatest. You may not be able to fully utilize it for whatever internal policy reasons. And there may need to be broader guidance, promulgated across the federal government to be able to fully leverage what's out there. And what's out there is changing every day, right? We deploy a new update to our system. We've done 2 in the last month. So it's really something where I think you have to be a good customer as well. Yeah, it's not just on us to build the right thing, it's also on you to be able to use it.
Yeah, I think we've been talking a lot today about potential dangers or actual dangers from AI, but it's worth taking a step back and realizing there's a lot of really great stuff that comes out of AI too. So from a research perspective, it enables a lot of avenues that would have been closed to us in terms of massively multilingual systems, cross-modal systems that can reconcile visual and linguistic information and other kinds of modalities of sensors that might be available to a robot but aren't to a human being. So you can start to knit together reality in these new ways and induce these alignments across what were previously sort of completely disjoint systems. And that's all because these models, for all of their expensive training, turn out to be really parsimonious representations of reality. They just take sort of everything and squish it into a panini press, and then you can insert that sandwich that you have basically into any number of different meals. And so I think it's worth saying that this innovation, particularly in generative AI, which allows us to imagine different scenarios and possible realities in system training, is really powerful and in some senses really worth the risk. And I'm so happy that we're talking about managing the risk, but I think also these are the very technologies that allow us to detect generative AI frequently. So it's not really separable from itself.
I'll divide it into 2 categories. One is the sort of mission of whatever the agency or the government entity. That's going to be enduring. That's going to take some time. That's going to be getting past legal, getting past security to do, like fine-tune these big models on specific special data that the government has that others don't. I think that, we expect that to be big payoffs, over the next couple of years. But before that, man, let's get at this. Let's use these models on Word documents and spreadsheets and PowerPoints. Let's get after that. I think that is going to be adopted day one. Once we get those tools, get that tooling, office automation things, let's bring that in. If we shouldn't need a lot of legal and a lot of security rigmarole to get past that. I think that will impact us on day one. So figure out how to bring that in.
So Mark, there's a question. I want you to respond to this statement as a true or false. Okay, the fastest adoption of AI in the U.S. government is in boring areas, such as acquisition, contracts, Word documents. Are organizations specifically ignoring mission-critical systems first? True or false? And why?
What was what was that thing we said about misinformation earlier? Can I say something and convince you all that it's truth? No. So that, did you just write that down after what I just said?
No, we gotta, somebody asked the question. You have a plan somewhere.
I will say this, it's every agency's sort of tendency is to get after that mission thing first. That's what's most important. That's what you're spending your budget on, right? That's what you're focused on, is accomplishing that mission. But the easiest and most impactful adoption will be on the mundane. That's what I'll say. I don't think it's a true or false, either or. I think it's parallel. I think it's simultaneous. But you know, the fastest, quickest, and most impact will be on. I mean, United States government runs on spreadsheets. God bless us. So let's, and forms. Let's get at that first.
Yeah, I would piggyback. When I heard that, I mean, one of the things I say is a lot of really good things happen at the edge, right? So it isn't like everyone thinks, what do you think of when you think of AI? Oh, ChatGPT and OpenAI. Well, sometimes if I have 300 documents that I'd really like to drop in a workspace and ask questions and get to like that, it's really, really good. It goes back to what I also mentioned too earlier, which is being very responsible with which data I'm putting together. And it gives, it's a little more, like, especially if we go through a legal process to grab that information, you got to handle it certain ways. There's certain legal rules like grand jury materials and other things we have to do. So I would say at the edge, like solving some of those problems, helping somebody answer a few questions that could maybe open up an investigation or keep somebody safe. Like, I can't agree with you more about that.
Yeah.
I'll kind of flip this on its head a little bit and say, because of the ways that we're automating the mundane tasks, it makes that human touch so much more important. I mean, I'm sure there's other folks in the room who get sales emails that are clearly generated by ChatGPT or some other generative technology. I almost always delete those. But if somebody's actually going to spend the time and engage with me and talk with me, that's the key piece of it, right? And it kind of parallels to being an intelligence briefer and engaging with your principal, right? And how important that relationship is now that the information is all out there, but that human connection that's made, it makes it so much more critical. And that's why I think you will never be replaced. That's the first thing. But also that it's where AI has a shortcoming. It doesn't have any emotional intelligence. So, yeah. Although some people want to date AI, so I'm not 100% sure about that.
Adam, one other thing, if I could just add to that, I think one of the things too that we've talked with our teams about is I hear like, oh, what kind of time savings can I get with this as we go through, right? And it's not really a time savings, right? What I hope for is, and I like making up corny phrases, but I'll share one with you. I call it kind of a time shift. If I've got somebody that has a bunch of data, and right now they've got to spend 90% of their time probably messing with a spreadsheet, grabbing it from here, parsing it, doing all these other things, data science, all those things that are wonderful and I love. But I've got to do all that work, and then I get to actually think about what I just organized. If you could reduce the amount of time it takes to do all that nug work, kind of getting it out, to then actually just think about whatever problem that you have in there and you can shift that time, that's where I'm really excited for AI. Really excited that we can do that and really be thinking about those problems as opposed to just really sitting there trying to shuffle through those things and work through the 80,000 documents or whatever it is.
So sort of one more question on this kind of market topic. AI has sort of gone through these boom and bust cycles, for certainly more than a decade. The current one, do you think we are sort of near the beginning and middle of the AI hype cycle? Are we going to see more near-term improvements?
I have to remind everybody that I filed an OGE 450. All my stock trades are public.
Yeah, I think the answer to that question is probably yes and no. So yes, I think we're going to see a lot more innovation in this space. No, I don't think that the sole source of that innovation is going to come from large companies training increasingly large models. So I think what we're seeing start to emerge is a competitive marketplace of different models that are fit for different use cases, some of which are gigantic and speculative and might represent more of what will look and feel like strong AI, and other models that will be for sifting through 300 documents or doing a contract mod, which, by the way, should not be a heroic action. So I think AI, I think what we're going to see is a lot more players in this space utilizing technologies that used to be available only to folks who had their own server farm, and that's going to be a really good thing for industry writ large.
Yeah, you go.
I think we're way in the early innings of this current cycle. I'm not sure we're going to see the come down this time because of a confluence of different factors that led to where we are right now in the current cycle, which is explosion in compute power, explosion in data availability and scraping technologies to be able to bring that data in and train these models. All of that happened essentially simultaneously, and in basically the mid 2010s-ish, so 2015, 2016, right? And that's what's pushed us to this point. It's kind of like the internet post the dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s. So to me, we are going to see a lot of near-term improvements. I think, just to throw one out there, I think GPT-5 is going to be very impressive. And yeah, they're a private company, so there's no fear about me pumping their stock. And I think that some of the other things that come out, Sora being a recent example, where people looked at it and said, wow, this is kind of unbelievable. And we're going to have more of those moments in the next 5 to 10 years.
So we've got about 10 minutes left, so if you have any other questions, please make sure you get them onto the note cards. Will, this one may be for you. Do you see any of the AI detection models that you're sort of working through ever get to the point where they're going to be consumer grade and rolled out to the average consumer and utilized on your standard tech platform, social media platform, web browser extensions, things of that nature, where consumers will really have the ability to strengthen their sort of deepfake detection capability?
So from a scientific and technical perspective, I would say we have really good footing testing against particular models. So that every answer to the question that you just asked is evaluation specific. So we have a lot of commercial industry being stood up right now with very strong VC backing and very diverse VC backing that has robust claims about the fidelity of detection algorithms. What we've focused on as a research program is building out the technical foundations of an evaluation infrastructure that allows you to test not just one particular model that they might be effective and fine-tuned against, but really a diversity of models and a diversity of models under different data conditions. So for instance, detection algorithms that might be perfectly fine on an uncompressed version of particular data could fail on compression, and they could fail at a very specific threshold. And so I think to the extent that we have a robust conversation between the evaluation community, the research community, and the developers, we will see commercial grade technologies, and we'll see a lot of them. But my feeling is that ultimately the consumer market is going to be one where companies will assemble, just like other cybersecurity tools, perhaps more than one of them at a time.
So, related to data breaches, we see online data breaches happen every day, and so have any of you encountered a scenario where you've seen AI being used to mitigate or support any data breaches or helping us from data and information being leaked?
Yeah, I think actually, that's an emerging area for most cybersecurity tooling that either is doing it sort of live monitoring or after the fact to do forensics. I think that using AI to sort of sift through, petabytes of logs is something that's actually, it's several years old, right? Maybe half a decade or a decade old, applying that technology. So we've seen more and more of that. We use it use it at NGA. We use AI in cyber defense all the time, and I'm assuming that FBI is using it as well.
Great. So I think we've got 2 more questions, and I want to ask them to everyone. I want everyone to answer it. So looking ahead, what opportunities or future trends do you see as you look into your crystal ball for the use of AI in online data and information? So Welton, why don't you start?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, we're very early stage in building the detection technologies that are going to help you do your work better. Part of this is we've got 2 essentially simultaneous problems happening, right? One is the massive data explosion. I think the latest statistics are there's more data generated every single day than all the data created previous to that day, right? So that's how much stuff we're creating on a daily basis. And a lot of that stuff is important for intelligence purposes, for investigative purposes. And we have to keep up with that. Really, the only way to keep up is to have some kind of AI assistant be able to sift through that content for you, identify things, triage, essentially, the data, so that you don't have to spend, and actually it would be impossible for humans to spend that much time looking at it, right? Because humans have to sleep and eat and take care of their kids and all of that stuff. So to me, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, even in that space, getting that blocking and tackling right before we even start to think about, AI's designing a, West Coast offense or something like that. So,
likely context and personalization, and a lot of that is going to be driven, I think, by theory of mind. So a deep understanding of the user's purposes in triaging online information, the user's social circle, so basically the dialogue that they're engaged in and the context of that dialogue, the meaning particularly of terms and concepts within that dialogue. I think all of that will enable technologies like personal assistants. There are also ideas being floated like, well, in addition to a personal assistant, do I just need a personal replacement online for a little while, just to continue on this Reddit thread talking for a little bit? I'll come back to it later. So I think we're going to see a lot of innovation and technologies really bringing these AI models down to the local level, which will help us a lot, I think, as we're starting to see other social media offerings, for instance, Mastodon, where they would require a local enforcement model if you wished to keep up community standards.
We're in the early days of some really cool experiments, and those experiments involve taking the visual record of the Earth that we have from space, historical record that we have, and merging it with millions and millions of finely curated humans' reports about what they see on those images. And so we're sitting on two big sets of data, a gold mine of data, where we have images that nobody else in the world has, and we have experts that have described what's on those images in expert language and text. And we know that by combining those 2 things, we're sitting on a sort of AI gold mine. So we're really looking forward to this multimodal experiment where we bring those 2 things together, and then we'll be able to ask questions, historic questions. Hey, have you ever seen, AI model, have you ever seen this particular activity, this kind of object in this part of the world and this time? And, what a cool thing that will be for our country to be able to do that.
Well, I have to give one too.
You want to? Yeah.
No, I'm happy to. I think what's going to be interesting, kind of like a personal reflection, and I think how it'll affect where I work. The personal reflection is I think it's going to change the way we do our work, and it already is. I think there are going to be much more visual things that you might be seeing people standing in a space and moving this around. I think they might be interacting with people from farther away or interacting with AI tools that way to get to that kind of that time shift I'm talking about, where people are actually talking about the problems, solving some of those problems that way, maybe sharing an intelligence product that way of looking at some of the images you have there, pulling them in, doing all that. I think that's really exciting, and I think that'll be a really good way of collaborating. I think I've talked with my kids of I think they're their workspace is going to look a heck of a lot different than what mine was as I've grown up. The challenge that will be for that, as I'll go back to, is for any of us, whether you would call it evidence or you would call it collection, whatever you want to call it, is how do you take all that stuff when that's a changed workspace, and how do I distill it down? How do I give it attribution? How do I give it all these different things that we are used to using in our current systems, whether that be you're briefing your seniors on something, or like me, I have to assemble that evidence and then take it to a courtroom and explain it to attorneys or a judge or a jury. So, we've got these places in our society that have checks and balances on things, and they are gateways, and they hold the gates. How do we arrange that information in such a way that when they go through those gates, it makes sense? That'll be a huge challenge.
So last question, again, for everybody. So we've spent a lot of time here talking about the negative implications of AI. Things like deep fakes, information operations, data leaks. I am inherently a positive person. And so I would love for each one of you to just provide one example that you see where AI is making a positive contribution to your organization, your family, or society. So Jason, why don't we start with you and come on back?
Yeah, mine's again, I can't get into specifics of any particular investigation, but I will tell you some mass casualty events and some other large-scale events we've been able to use facial recognition for responsibly to narrow down folks that would be some subjects that we need to go talk to. So that has been something that we have definitely worked on. We've used it a bit too, again, in identifying other criminals that go the whole gamut. I told you about CSAM, like the child sexual abuse material. A lot of really good stuff there. Again, back to narrowing it down to the people that actually are the folks who committed the crime, and then we go and introduce ourselves to them.
I'm going to do like a non-mission one and say, every day the Spotify algorithm recommends my daughter's songs to new listeners all around the world. So keep bringing it in, Spotify.
I think our office has had a number, in NSF as well, has had a number of programs that touch on crisis informatics. That field owes its existence to AI in many ways, and so I think we now are able to use modeling in ways that we used to have to do information extraction. And if you've ever tried to do information extraction in a massively multilingual setting, we're in a much better place right now.
Great. Welton.
I'd say, Mark, you're lucky because my kids are 5 and 2, and the music that they listen to is not comprehensible. Mr. Farts, has anyone ever heard of Mr. Farts?
Don't Google that. Don't Google that on your government computer.
Yeah. Go home and do it. Go home and do it. Look, I think that, and this is going to sound a little bit self-inflating, I guess, but we help our clients every day identify violent threats to their principals, hate speech, images that are anti-LGBT, anti-Semitic, all of those different categories of stuff. We try to minimize the harm. We blur the images. We make it easier for folks to identify this stuff without having to wade through even more dangerous and noxious information. And I think that's a big piece of this, right? If you think about your experience of the internet every day, whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or just doing a Google search, for example, there are lots of humans behind making sure that you don't see all the terrible stuff that crazy people are posting on the internet. And AI can do a lot of that. AI is quite good at removing, I'd say AI can remove things like CSAM, so you don't have to encounter it, right? Heaven forbid that you ever have to encounter that kind of stuff. So, I am heartened by some of the tasks that AI can take off our plate. And hopefully we're doing right by our clients by doing that. So,
awesome. That's a great place to stop. So please thank the panel for an excellent discussion. Great.